very good afternoon now. I hope I didn't make you sleep because I usually the good lunch after a good meals, right? It tends to a lot of sugar, turn into sugar contents that make you sleep, just like not Azun that he tried to make you sleep. So I'm the other way around. I try to make you awake to listen to the talk. So today, I think the topics for me, I'm going to talk about a digital health. I think maybe some of you heard about this and some of you may be new to you, but this is a trend or something that a big evolutions happening in the life science as well as the healthcare arena. And this morning you already heard from IMAX, right? Dr. Mary, Professor Lakshan talk about a specific sensors that use how this stream into a very small little things that enable some of the technologies that I'm going to talk about in the digital health. All right? But before this, I think just now Eng Tong also briefly introduced Keysight. I'm sure some of you may have heard about Keysight, but some of you might not know what is Keysight because we've been through a transformation as well. All right? So if I tell you we are HP, we were HP before. I mean, in the early 1939, that was about 80 years ago, a company started with the Hewlett-Packards. And we are focusing on tests and measurements. And that is our primary so-called products that we generate during that time. But over the years, I think most of you know HP because of the printers, the computers. And at one time, they decided that, all right, I want to focus pretty much on the consumer, big volume, high revenue. So this is where we get spin-off back in 1999 called Agilent Technology. So during this time, Agilent also doing some sort of like internal transformation from the traditional test and measurement, a little bit on the semiconductors, right? So we also focus on some of the semiconductors manufacturing during that time. But over the year, about 14 years, they decided, all right, we already invest good enough in the life sciences and also chemical analysis. They want to spin out the test and measurement portion. So this is where we are now. We call a Keysight. We're back to our root, which is focus on test and measurement. And a Keysight to you might be new because we are just about 4 years old, but we have a long history, about 80 years of the experience developing a test and measurement instrument. But today I'm not going to talk about Keysight. What my topic is, what I call a life science 4.0. Okay? Some of you may have heard it or you may be new to you. But if you look at Life Science 4.0, I'm sure a lot of you heard about Industrial 4.0, right? Anyone raise up your hand if you heard before Industrial 4.0, right? So you see, all of you know about Industrial 4.0 and how does it relate to the life science? There are some elements that actually contributes to the life science. If you look at Industrial of course happened way back in the 18th century, right? If you look at in the first industrial revolutions there, it's happened when the steam machine back in 84 or something like that, during that time, James Watt invented a steam machine and that kickstart what they call a mechanization area, and that is where you have a big machine, that sewing machine, the textiles, so-called industrial, kind of like booming, and also communication as well as the transportation. And this is where the first revolution. However, it took them almost 100 years for the second evolution in the industry. And that is where sometime is 1870. And this is where the inventions of the electric motors, right? All these things put together, electric cities and all these things. And that is where the second industrial revolution is talking about a mass produce, right? So you have electrical motors, you're talking about a lot of things that you can do it in a much faster way. But if you look at the industrial revolution, it took them almost every time 100 years, right? So from 1870 up to during the third revolution, it's actually 1960, that is where the transistor, right? What you all talk about this morning, right? How do you put the 1,000 or million of transistors together, be it on the semiconductor levels? And this is where things become smaller and smaller. And this is where the computer from a big room string become a smaller room. And this is the third evolution, where you put together become a great automation. A lot of automation happening in this. And only recently, things getting changed. When you hit on the 20th and 21st century, time's getting shorter and faster. And now we are talking about Industry 4.0. At this point of time, we are entering the Industry 4.0. We are talking about anything get connected, being your instruments, the peoples, and everything get connected. And that is where we are today. And when you look into 21st century, it only took them 50 years. All right? So it's the things that 100, now it's getting shorter and shorter. But how about you look at from life science perspective, right? In the context of instrumentation used in the hospitals, right? It's actually much shorter. It doesn't happen in the 18, 19, or maybe towards the end of the 19th century, where this is the first X-ray invented back in 1895, right? So this is the instrumentations that used in the hospitals. And imagine that the ECG, or EKG you call it, does not invent until 1903. So you can see is that a lot of hospital equipments that we see today, you walk into in the hospital today, it's actually only happened in the beginning or the end of 18th or 19th century. All right? So this is where we look at from life science perspective. I hope you can see this. So I'm going to share with you what this Industry 4.0 has something to do also related to the Industry 4.0. So I'm looking into two contexts here. One is the customers. If you are the producer or the manufacturer, or you produce an instrument, who are you targeting from customer view perspective? And the other from the forces. Forces can be from the market forces, can be the policy makers, can be many, many things, the environments, your competitors. So let me move in what I call it as a life science 1.0. It's pretty much talking about a blockbuster product. At that point of time, if you are an equipment manufacturer, you are focusing on the blockbuster product. And who are you serving? I think from customer perspective, I break into 4 areas here. I hope you can see the first here is talking about a patient or the consumer. Second here is a payer. In this case, payer, you can term it as sometimes we pay ourselves, or most of the time, our insurance, the insurance that we bought, pay for us. So this is what I call it a payer. The third area is the physician or the service provider. So it's very clear is that it's a doctor that you are paying, the doctors that you are trying to target, or the specific hospitals that you are trying to target. And last but not least, the policy maker, governments, agencies that you are trying to influence. But if you look at from the life science 1.0, the very, very first stage, if you're focusing on the blockbuster product, all you need to do, approach a physician or the doctors or the specific hospitals, and that is where you get a lot of influence, and this is where you sell your product. You don't have to worry about the policy, payers, as well as to some extent the patient or the consumer. So this is about 1.0. However, things getting changed because forces coming in, right? You cannot be stagnant forever looking into the blockbuster product. But another area here is that 3 forces that quite prominent is one is about the R&D productivities, right? You cannot just forever stick with the products that you produce, right? I think each one of the presenters just now mentioned about how do you continue evolve, how do you continue roll out a new product, and this is where the forces actually, because you need to compete, right? And bear in mind that each one of you that have a patent file, there is a period, right? The max that allow you 20 years. After the 20 years, your patents become free, it opens to all. So when you talk about patent cliff, is that once you hit the patent cliff, which is the 20 years later, anybody can use these technologies to come out their own product. So you need to be prepared for that. And last but not least, regulatory hurdles. Like this morning, people ask about, hey, what is the FDA requirement? What is the CE marks testing requirement? All this has become very, very critical. And that, with all these forces, right, it's actually drive the company to look into more diversified, right? If you have a patents that you are going to end soon, how are you going to diversify? How are you going to increase the productivity so that you can create adjacent products that allow you to sell or to address more customers. So in this in Life Science 2.0, you are still pretty much focused about the doctors, the specific hospitals that you want to work with. You still pretty much center around them. As long as I have a product, I can provide you the diversified product, I think you are pretty kind of safe at this point of time. However, things getting changed. If you look at from industrial, for the Life Science 3.0, they are now focusing on the health outcome, right? The patient or whoever need to know exactly if I going through this process or this procedure, what exactly my health outcome is going to be. And this is where the different forces that are coming in. Reimbursement pressure, right? If you are the insurance provider, right, you want to make sure that doctor treat the patient first time you get it right, not multiple times. And these are the reimbursements that pressures that as a manufacturer that they are trying to produce. If you are doing some MRI machine, you need to make sure that the accuracy is there. And of course, you are looking into provider and buyer constellation. Some like healthcare company, like for example, pharmaceutical company bought over so-called the insurance company. All this become a consolidation that give a lot of pressure to the manufacturer as well. And last but not least, patients have become more knowledge. So it's called an empower patient, and whereby patient will have asked for more details. What are the procedures? What are you going to do with me? What is my health outcome if I gone through this 3 or 4 procedure? So all these things actually drive towards a change of mindset. If you are a manufacturer, you are now trying to take a consideration of payer. No longer a doctor and hospitals that you are trying to push, but at the same time, you need to please who pay the bill. All right? And things moving on. From the Life Science 3.0, and this is where bring us to where we want to see today. This is where data-driven. A lot of you just now mentioned about how do you use the sensors to capture data, right? And how do you process the data? Data has become so powerful when you move into the Life Science 4.0. This is where we are today. And looking from the forces itself, the speed of technology, right? This morning you heard a lot of technology. How can this transformation from the iMac talk about the 16 rack, right? Everything can become a chipsets that allow you to do a specific task, right? So all these things is actually allowed a lot of the designers, the R&D, to streamline or make it certain things become small enough that you can carry around, or you can patch to yourself to do certain specific tasks. And of course, the point here talk about super consumer. When you talk about super consumer here, is every one of us here, not just about the doctor, right? Consumers like a patient, the wearable devices that you have, and also the data that you have captured. All this become a supercomputer that allow you to analyze the data. And last but not least, aging population. I think this is one of the critical factors here that I think the world people are getting aged, right? It's aging population. And also the chronic diseases like diabetes, you have some cancer patients and all those things, mental health. All things require a very, very close so-called monitoring. And this is what we call a data-driven platform. And because of all these things, the manufacturer, if you are the service provider, you are now focusing into every single category of it, being patient itself, the payer, the policy, of course, the physician, and also to some extent the policy maker. Just imagine that, let's say in Malaysia, right? A lot of politicians say that, hey, in order to control diabetes, I increase the price of the sugar. So do you think that that kind of thing will help? But if you imagine that you have a device that can control or can monitor a patient or the behavior or the end user, the sugar intake, I think that is going to help. And to some extent also, we have some very good so-called example here is that if you have a patient that gone through a kidney transfer, right? Kidney transfer. After kidney transfer, treatment is very, very critical. It's got medicine is very, very important for them. And if you are the policymakers that invest so much money to treat a kidney transfer patient, right? You want to make sure is that the procedure that you already spent, the medicines that the people want to take is very, very critical. And all this thing, that what I've summarized into what we call a new trend or new evolution in the what we call a digital health. Pretty much being on your healthcare data or your services, everything will be digitized and put into the cloud. All right? So with this Life Science 4.0, I will move on to my topic to very specifically talk about the digital health. All right? Digital health is where the healthcare transformation is. And I break down into three major functions here, what I call a patient-centric, workflow engineering, and last but not least, the healthcare intelligence. I think this morning you heard a lot of people talking about patient-centric, type of the sensors that you build inside, right? Just now I mentioned about the ECG. ECG invented it back in 1903, but it doesn't has the wireless capability until 2003. And recently, even though a company, I think if you are familiar, is a company from the United States called iRhythm. They can even have a patch. You patch it, it will continue to measure your ECG performance for the next 2 weeks, right? So these are some of the new technology. And last week, Apple announced their iWatch is actually FDA certified. Of course, that is not a full-fledged of the ECG so-called data monitoring, but at least they allow the people to really constantly monitor whether there is a heart issue or not. So we can see here from the patient-centric, this morning, I think Dr. Mary also mentioned about the CGM, or Professor Lakshan talking about the CGM. I think CGM is definitely another key invention here. What it means is that if you are a diabetes patient, imagine is that every single meal, just like just now we're having a meal, right? You have to do a blood check to check your glucose level. If you're too high, then you need to inject insulin. So what the company do here for the patient-centric product is that it's a closed loop. They have a glucose monitoring, they have an insulin pump, at the same time, they have a smartwatch that continue to tell what is the status of the glucose level for the patient, especially for diabetes. It's everything closed loop, it will be taken care of. So you can see, imagine is that more and more, product that actually go into our body. Be it monitoring, assist you, or to do certain tasks that in the past that's impossible. So all this information you can see, I put a little a note here, is actually all can be shared through the wireless communication. All right? So the second area here, moving from a patient-centric to the workflow engineering, this is where, if you look at in the hospital environments, right, nowadays, everything is get connected, right? MRI machine, right? Any particular things that all these are get connected, it's become the workflow in the hospitals, it's become so efficient. I still remember during back days, about maybe 10 to 15 years ago, when I do any x-ray machine, right, you go to a specific department, you do an x-ray, and the x-ray have to be physically moved to the doctors, you have to wait there, and before they tell you whether you're any wrong with your bodies or all these things or that. But nowadays, recently I just went for my x-ray on my knee. Just before I reached my consultant, the hospital or the doctors, he already reviewed through all the scanning of my bodies. Imagine is that all this has been digitally transferred. You're even faster than what you walk from one department to the other department. So this is have a lot of major transformation in this year, especially when it comes to a workflow management. And one thing that I want to highlight here, these are the new thing here. In fact, these are one of the areas that I'm going to go in more detail in my next slide. It's a precision medicine, right? I think this morning, Dr. Mary also mentioned about give you some example. It's a similar company that I'm going to talk about. Precision medicine will be another key, innovations that allow healthcare to have a closed loop control, have monitoring, and the better ways to control diseases as well as the effectiveness of the drugs that you take. And last but not least, healthcare intelligence. Healthcare intelligence is become critical for digital health. All the information from the patient-centric hospital, all this can be stored into the cloud. Imagine is that your physician able to tell while you're at home whether you are taking a medicine, what is your glucose level, what is your blood pressure levels, all these things will be stored into the cloud. For the insurance company, they have a better so-called predictivities in terms of the risk associated with any of the patient. All these things will become linked all together, and that is where the digital health, that's going to be the next so-called evolutions that's going to happen, especially in the healthcare segments. So let me give you this one example of the precision medicine. All right, I think this morning Mary talked about Proteus, right? I think Proteus is one of the early, one of the few customers that really produce what we call ingestible sensors, right? Today's topic is about sensors, right? Each one of you try to come out exactly, hey, what can sensor help? In this invention is very, very, how do I say, unique, because what they do is that they are using a materials that can be digest in your stomach, right? They're using a magnesium and copper. Magnesium and copper, what does that mean? If you study engineering, this is where you are trying to produce like a capacitor inside the stomach, because when you swallow this in like a two plate, inside your stomach you have the acid, and that from that you are kind of like generate the electron trying to move around, and that is where it will generate a small electrical signal. All right? So this company is a very, very smart. I mean, from the ingestible sensor, they have a patch. This patch allow the so-called the technologies to capture what is your body temperature, what is your posture, whether you are walking, you are sleeping, all this they will capture. And at the same time also they tell you exactly what time you take the medicine. So why this is so important? I give you an example. There's a few applications that are very, very critical. Like for example, a doctor trying to cure a mentally ill person, right? Taking medicine is very, very important for mentally ill patient. And in order to how do I say, to quantify whether the drugs that they give is good enough to cure this, I think this closed loop process will definitely help. Because it's actually tell the doctor know exactly what time they take the medicine. After they take the medicine, what are the activities? Are they still walking around in the room? Are they relaxed, or they kind of sleep? How long does they sleep? And things like that. So this new so-called transformation in digital health, especially on the precision medicines, it become very, very critical. And this sensor, of course, unlike the semiconductor, because it has to be a consumable, right? So magnesium you can actually extract from like a fish, whatever, right? Coppers, you can be from the nuts and all things. All these are from the raw editable ingredients. And imagine is that why these are so important. There are millions of different patients, like say for example, a diabetes patient, mentally ill patient, elderly and all things. You are talking about billions of sensors is going to consume on a monthly basis. And the potential here is tremendous. If you have a sensors that allow you to tell exactly when are you taking the medicine, how effective is the medicine. So that's the reason why I bring out this as one of the topics that we would like to share. And the second thing here, if you look at looking from the digital health context, right, one of the key enabler is actually the wireless communication. If you are in the consumer electronic, or even though in the mobile communication, this is nothing to you, because you already know that from the personal area network, wireless LAN network, to the wide area network, all these are the available technology. But what does that mean to the healthcare? These are very, very new to them. You will be surprised is that when you're talking to a medicals or healthcare customers, to them, some of them are quite new. And how to test this, it will become some key challenges for them. How do you integrate a Bluetooth into the pacemaker? I think that is a very, very challenging for some of the healthcare or medical customers here. And I just want to give you an example. From that wireless communication, right, and this morning Dr. Mary also mentioned about the interference, right? The interference of the specific signal or the battery or the ADC design can influence. And this is what we bring our instrument to go to one of the hospitals, as in the United States, and you can see how busy is the signal here. It can be a Wi-Fi, you can have Bluetooth, everywhere. Of course, the culprit is actually come from us, right? I mean, each one of us have a mobile phone. Most of the time, we will turn on certain Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. The hospital equipments, right? Even though microwave oven, there's some leakage from the microwave oven in the hospital. The printer also is a wireless printer, mouse, and some of the access point in the wireless LAN. Imagine is that if you are the manufacturer of the healthcare instrument, and these are the mission critical so-called instrument, like for example, a pacemaker, right? Things that you want to make sure the patient will continue to survive. You don't want to go into the hospital environment immediately, it's actually shut down. So this is one of the critical or the challenges that they have. And to summarize the whole digital health so-called test challenges, if you are moving into these so-called inventions or the innovations, right? These are the two group of challenges that I give you a summary. One is actually on the device level. On the device level, battery is definitely one of the most critical because each one of the wearable devices is actually battery operated. So you want to make sure is that how long the battery is going to last. So this is definitely one of the key challenges that you have. I also briefly talk about the wireless and also the signal integrity, the communication part from your processors to a specific task. You want to make sure the integrity is actually there, especially on the signal side. And last but not least, when you throw into your device into the working environment, you need to make sure is that the network and operator acceptance test, right? So let's say you have embedded in the mobile communication like 4Gs, right? Or to some extent you have the mobile Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. All this you need to have go through a proper conformance testing. And last but not least, and this is by far, and recently, only about last month, I read about articles in healthcare environment, they are going to spend majority of the investment into network security. Just now I mentioned about your personal data, the hospital data, right? Everything will store into the cloud. And how do you protect it? It's going to have a major investment. You're talking about 1.5 trillion investment in the next few years. So this is another major area if you are into this type of the market. So I'm going to end my presentation just to show you where Keysight is. Just to give you a flavor is that in order to address whatever the challenges we have, right, we actually address from end to end, from the wafer all the way to the final products, to the cloud, and we provide a hardware solution, a software solutions that allow the customers to do this unnecessary simulation as well as the testing environment. All right, with this I know they're overrun a little bit, so I would like to say thank you to all of you.